Well, hello and good evening. It's evening for me, 6 p.m. Eastern time where I am here in Florida. I hope you're doing well. I'm so glad you joined me today. And I'm Dr. Robin Gould, and pardon my phone, I keep it with me and I don't really know how to turn the sound down properly. And I never know if I need to look something up really quickly that I can't do on my other monitor. So anyway, I'm so glad you're here. And I wanted to let you know I'm wearing the same top as I wore last time, so you can bookend or put together these two teachings, because this is part 2 of Miriam's Dilemma. And this is what we did last week. So last week we did Miriam's Dilemma, and today I think is the 9th. So I think that was like the second, I think it was the second. So I'm going to finish that teaching. It's raining here. I just hope we don't have internet problems. Now, if we have internet problems and the show knocks out, because I don't have fiber optics out here, I just have coaxial cable, I'm just going to set out another broadcast and launch back in. So you'll find me. Okay, so we will finish this today. I'll work that out. But anyway, so I just wanted you to be able to recognize the teaching really quickly. So my website is newcovenantpath.com. I'm one of the Becky book authors, BEKY, Building and Encouraging the Kingdom of Yeshua, in case you're new to the show. But if you're new to the show, go back and watch the first part of Miriam's Dilemma from last week and then catch up here. Now, I'm doing things a little bit differently this week because the request is that this would be a series. And what they are asking is that I would, let me get to the chat here. I would like to see the comments. Okay, so in case people come in, usually I like to read the chat as we go, and then we talk about things. And in this broadcast, I will do the chat at the very end, so that people watching that just want to hear the series and they don't need the interactive part of it, they can just kind of shut the thing down, and then we can continue chatting. So feel free to say anything throughout the show that you want, and in the end we'll talk more. So anyway, nice to see you. I got my ring light, which you're going to see unfortunately in my glasses, but I can't figure out any other way to do it. So let's get into what we are talking about. Now, last week we discussed Miriam. So Miriam would be the older sister of Moses. So Moshe, right? How you call him, right? So, so I'm glad to see. I'm tempted to talk to people as you say hello, because I'm so tempted. But we're gonna, at the end, we'll talk and have more interactive time. So last week we talked about Miriam, and so I want to introduce a little bit. If you've watched the first one thing you notice is that we're going very in depth with Miriam and her story and what's really happening in the culture. And this is very important, because my hypothesis and theory and what I'm trying to prove to you is that the story of Miriam isn't a story about how women need to not talk, and how the father likes to shame and shun people, and how we're all being taught a lesson all the time about how bad we are, or all of these different things that seem to come out of this story. This story is just such a triggering story, and it affects people, particularly people new to the Bible. Now, if you're new to the Bible and you love the Father and you're just like kind of shocked by some of these stories, but you trust the Father, you are going to keep going and probably figure some of this stuff out for yourself. But I'm trying to make it easier, putting it all in one place so that we can actually talk about this. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm trying to convince you, because it's what I believe and what I find when I read and study, that this is all about the garden and all about our biggest obstacle, which is the false self, which I believe is the entire journey. Our entire journey is about not operating in the false self, to give the Father his credit that's due, because he made humans good. He made humans very good. He made you the way he wanted you to be. He didn't make you to try to be like him. So that's where that's basically the premise. And so we're using this story. So I'm going to recap a little bit of our story from last time, and then we're going to launch into our story this time. So even before, I want to remind you that no matter what has happened today, I want you to be able to clear the mechanism and just be present, and let's learn together. Even though my allergies are acting up, let's just pretend that's not happening, because the future begins now. And whatever we're going to learn today is going to transform us, and we're going to become closer to the Father and each other. So, have you ever noticed when you watch television or like a movie, you can really tell different high quality writing to, just low quality writing that's really dependent on special effects and CG and all that. So, that's really true. Like, you'll have people, like, let's just talk about like the Star Wars movies. Like, some people the new ones are okay. It does introduce the prequel themes, which are neat, and kind of give people more information. And some people really like special effects, but a lot of people will talk about how they really preferred the older movies because the older movies relied on character development, the characters. So if you ever watched a show where you watch a few seasons of it and you enjoy it and you like the people and you feel like you know the people and you've had like this emotional response to whatever it is that they're going through, that's good writing, right? Because what they've done is they've drawn pictures of people that you are rooting for, right? So whenever you see a show and you really, 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 really dislike the villain and just hope bad things, or you're really shooting for somebody, it's like they've written rich characters. And it's not you always saying, what would I do? It's you are really into these characters. I'm kind of trying to do that here with Miriam because the father uses these stories to talk to us, right? He tells us family stories. And these aren't just for us to always think about what would I do in that situation. I want you to get out of that mindset and thinking about what you would do. And I really want to get into what Miriam should do and what she did do and what the climate was and what was happening. I want you to like really get involved because I think sometimes we miss some of these stories because we've been taught in Christian circles years and years and years ago. Everything is an abstract idea about myself. And then I miss these rich characters and what the content is. I actually miss the content because I'm lost in philosophy. So we don't want to get lost in philosophy. We're going through this word by word. So there's 15 sentences in Miriam, and we go into that and we read it all in one chunk in last week. So go ahead and read that. I think it's Numbers 12, 1 through 15. I think that's what it is. Don't quote me, but I think that's what it is. I should have had that written down here. But let's get into it and find out where we left off. So I'll recap and then we're going to go where I left off. Okay, so I told you my goal. My goal is that I believe this story is using a lot of language that harkens us back to the garden story. So I call it garden language. The first time we hear these words are in the garden, and sometimes we haven't heard them since. But words hearken us to certain things, right? Certain words are like buzzwords. We know the meaning because, right? So there's a lot of words that we will use. Like, I know this is a very strong thing to say, but, and I don't mean this irreverently, but it's part of our urban vernacular. It's like if something's chaotic and stressful or something like that's a big problem, we'll say, oh my gosh, it just felt like 9/11. Like say there's a hurricane or there's something, you're like, oh, I just had these tones of 9/11. Now, the words 9/11, we know what that means. It refers to September 11th, 2001, when the planes crashed into buildings in New York City. And it's a very traumatic day, not just for our country, but just for really everywhere. It was just so catastrophic and just so unexpected, and it's just a terrible thing. But it was so significant that it's garnered and generated its own buzzword, not to be used irreverently. I'm just saying, whenever somebody says that, people know what I mean, right? So the Bible's like that. There's buzzwords. There's certain words that you're like, well, that's bringing me back to this. This story brings us back to Genesis. It brings us back to eating off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I believe the Miriam story is another version of this, right? Where the idea is our Father is going to restore all things. Miriam not excluded from being part of all things and restoring me and restoring you. So what we did last time was we covered about Miriam's past, right? About her life, about how important she was as a little girl. We talked about some of the things the sages have taught us about her, and it bears out in the text where it makes sense what the sages are saying. And that's something that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but there's a lot of really good things that you can learn from the sages. And I think that's exciting and maybe a new prairie for you to walk, to check that out. And don't be afraid of that. But Miriam, as a 6-year-old child, had admonished her father, who had divorced his mother to prevent the conception of sons, when Pharaoh threatened to throw all the baby boys, which you could understand his point, into the Nile. And Miriam was a little prophetess, operating in her gift, obeying the father, as she tells her father, no, remarry mommy and make a Moshe. She prophesies that there will be a deliverer of Israel and they will conceive him. And so that's a pretty big deal. Then we talk about how Miriam, and we go into the words and we find things that you don't see in a cursory reading of this story. You have to kind of go into it to find it. But because this is such an inflammatory story that's really led us down a lot of really weird paths, I really think it's important that we go into this story very deeply. So then we find from the sages talk about how Miriam's mother, right? She puts the baby Moshe in a basket, puts it in the reeds, and Pharaoh's daughter, who had leprosy, came down to engage in idolatry at the Nile. I mean, this is like probably a swampy, dirty area. It's not like I want to take a bath here. When she had all of the servants and the amazing ways that she could be bathed comfortably, in her home, in her house, then her chambers or whatever. But this was idolatry. But she touches the basket. She's cured of leprosy, and explains why she would take and adopt this beautiful child. This wasn't just like a beautiful child, right? So Miriam's a big deal. She's overseeing this happening. Then she approaches Pharaoh's daughter and says, let me go get you a wet nurse. And so, of course, she goes and gets her mother, and her mother gets paid wages to nurse and nurture and take care of her own baby. And so this is Miriam, right? Moshe's sister. Like, this is a really brave big sister, a prophetess that her father even listens to her. Her father didn't shame her or accuse her of not honoring him, spit in her face, any of these things that would demonstrate that she had been inappropriate, that she had done something dishonorable. So Miriam's a big deal in the terms of what she was called to do. Now, is Miriam any more of a big deal than me or you or your Aunt Thelma? No. All people. The Father is no respecter of persons. All people are important and are very good and are his delight, right? So last week when I said, this comment in one, I kind of noticed I said it where it wasn't about you. It's ultimately only about you, right? It's not like, where do I fit in? You are the thing. Because you are what the Father delights in, because he created you. He made you. This gives you status you didn't earn and you can't even take away. But you can't get your hands on your value. If either way, you didn't give it to yourself, nor can you extract it. And you also can't judge it. Your value is implicit because a valuable creator, the beyond value creator, created you. So this is really important. And knowing that isn't arrogant. It isn't lazy. It isn't self-righteous. It is the plan that you understand that you are made to be loved and to love. So you are lovable. You are enough the way he made you. But in this story, we have Miriam and Aaron speaking against Moshe. So here's some points that we made. We read the story. Let's look at some of the points we made here. All right, so some of the points are, we talked about, let's see, let me see. The Cushite woman. We talked about how Miriam was speaking about, they were speaking against him marrying the Cushite woman, where we talked last time about some of the theories people have about that. And really what this was, from my perspective, and I believe the evidence bears this out pretty significantly, that Miriam spoke into her father's life and it produced Moshe. And it was remarry mommy, so we can make a Moshe. We need to have a Moshe, right? Remarry mommy. Well, in this case, Moshe had left his wife, and now was on the mission years and years later, and he marries a Cushite woman. And so some of the sages believe she was dismayed at this, that he was doing this, because she had been called to speak to her own father against that action. So here she was like, wait a minute. The Father spoke through me then. Why wouldn't he be speaking through me now? Okay. So they spoke against him with the Cushite woman. They, both of them. But Miriam's the only one seeming to take the shunning. So let's keep going. Let's do a little bit more of our recap here. Then we talked about how the Lord heard it. The Bible goes out of its way to tell us that the Lord heard it. The Lord heard what was going on. Now, very clearly, the Father knows everything all the time. But the Bible goes out of its way to tell us that the Father heard this. So from my perspective, this is garden language, that the Father was present. The Father was aware. The Father was listening. He knew what was going on, but he also knew what was going on beneath the surface, what was really happening. When it says the Lord heard it, I don't think it just means, yeah, I hear what's going on. It's, I know what's going on. I hear there's something going on with Miriam. And he deals very specifically with Miriam. So the issue seems to be something that has captured his attention about her. And so the Lord heard it. He's a very present Father, very present in all things. And he knows underneath what's really going on with you. The working out our salvation with fear and trembling isn't that the Father doesn't know what's going on with you. But when we operate in our false self, the part of us that we create to solve our own problems and to give ourselves value and to make ourselves feel like we're better, more valuable, more lovable, when we're already made that way, but we think that we can make an impact on our value by things we do, this is the biggest problem that we have. Miriam is no different from anybody else. Even though she's done these great things, she's a human too. And the Father heard the struggle going on behind Miriam's eyes, if you will. What was really going on? A struggle within Miriam where she was broken and trying to cover this up with a false self. So we talked in different programs about what the false self is. Some false selves are the important one, the controller, the boss, the judge, whatever, right? There's a lot of different ones. The angry one, the victim. There's a lot of different false selves. And those are not things that the Father created. Those are graven images of ourselves we have created. That's an image of ourselves that we created. That's nothing that the Father can interact with, and he won't interact with it. What he'll do is he will be there to help you drop that false self and get back to your garden self, the true you he made, the only real you, right? The you, that's a you. So the Father's goal is always to restore. So if we're getting back into this, the Lord heard it, he is close. And then where we really left off was we were talking about Moshe. And let me get into where he talked about how he was really, really meek. And that we talked about how suddenly the Lord said to Moses, and he says, come out of there, the three of you, to the tent of meeting. So suddenly this word, and we go into what that word, where we find it. We find it in Genesis. And it was actually, no, we found it in Numbers. But the first time we see this word is in Numbers 6:9 with the Nazarite vow. It's about someone separated. And anyway, go in, learn that. But he says suddenly, so this is something that had gotten triggered, the God himself, right? Triggered. And he says, come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. And so the first thing I want to mention is that he didn't deal with them in front of the whole camp. He doesn't shame them and like, hey, I want the whole camp to see what happens to people that are divisive or are trying to, question the servant, my servant Moshe, right? He says, you three come out. So he sets them apart and he says, come, I want to talk to you. Just like a parent would. Come on, I want you to go into the other room with me. We're going to talk. right? We don't shame people and we don't have our rebukes in public. We take people aside. That's a very important thing, the principle. And the Father says here, he says, hear my words. Now that's interesting. Obviously, when the God of the universe separates you to the tent of meeting, you're listening, right? You're already listening. It's not like, well, here I'm at the tent of meeting and wondering what I'm going to make for dinner. No, you're like, attention. Okay. And so when he says, hear my words, think of if you have children or nieces or nephews or friends' children or even your pet. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, listen to me. That to me is not threatening. Now, there are times where we say to our kids, I want you to listen to me. I'm only going to say this once, right? There are times as parents we say that. And that could be somewhat of the tone here. But he goes out of his way to say, hear my words. So listen to the words I'm saying. I'm going to tell you something important that you need to know. And here's what he says. He says, if there's a prophet among you, and there was Miriam, right? I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. So that must be some of the way that he dealt with Miriam, with her prophecies, right? But he says, not so with Moshe. Not so with Moshe. He says, he is faithful in all my house. With him, I speak mouth to mouth, which is another whole idea of breath to breath, right? Clearly and not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Now, we didn't talk about this last week, but he beholds the form of the Lord. So Moshe's different. Moshe has a different approach with the way that he processes information than anybody else. So he's a different kind of kid. But the Father is the same Father for everybody in terms of his love. But he expresses that love in that his mode of communication differently with Moshe than with anybody else. So what he's saying to them is, listen to me. I deal with Moshe differently than I deal with anybody else on the planet. Like, this is personal, Miriam and Aaron. This isn't personal. I speak directly to him. So you can trust that he is leading you where I'm leading him to lead you. So as parents, we have different children that we talk to and deal with in different ways because they have different needs and different ways that they are going to absorb information. A good parent knows this. And we don't treat all of our children equally. Some children need more tough love than others. Some children need more time alone and more time out to kind of think about things than others. Some children need much more direct communication. Some children need more physical affection. Some children need reading hours. Some people need to be read to during reading hour, just like different kids. But the same Father shows up and he meets the needs of the people he made because he designed you the way you are. But he's telling them, listen to me. I don't deal with Moshe like I do anybody else because he has a unique way of meekness. So I talk to him directly. So he's really setting up the stage for you can trust what Moshe's doing. So the first thing is he's saying, you're safe. I talk to him directly. He's listening to me. You can trust you're headed in the right direction. So first things first, you're safe. Listen to me. Okay. Then he asks them, why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? We go back, we find that word afraid was in the garden when they were afraid and they hid. And he's like, oh, are we back to that? Why weren't you, they were hiding. Why weren't you hiding? Because you had really done something wrong. Apparently they didn't know they had done something wrong. You see, they weren't hiding. Okay, so let's just keep going, because sometimes in our false selves, we think we're right. We think we're doing the right thing. Whoops, sorry. We think we're doing the right thing. We think we are in the right. We are acting righteously. There are times we are confused and tricked in our own world. And oftentimes the false selves that we have do emerge from our gifts, right? They come from places in us that are designed in us. But all of a sudden we got some applause or some attention, or somebody said, oh, you're really good at that. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, then that must make me lovable. Well, that's when you've crossed the line into the false self. That's false. You're not lovable because of the things you do. You're lovable because the Creator made you lovable. Okay, I'm hammering that home hard because my redundancy there will not be lost. You need it. Okay. So let's keep going, and we're going to get to that final situation here that we talked about. It said that the anger of the Lord was aroused. And so but that word wasn't anger, it was nostril. And what breathed life into Adam? The nostril. And it was triggered. So the part of the Father that breathed life into Adam was triggered. That's a core part, a major, major part. Okay, so let's keep going because we're on slide 40. That's where we left off. And it said that after he spoke with them, he departed. And it looks like he sort of like took off in abandonment. No, he did not abandon anybody. The word is he moved, he walked, he acted on. Okay, so he walked, he moved. And that word is garden language as well. The first time we hear it is in Genesis 2:14, when he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, which really means in the spirit. So now we're going on. Okay, so let's go on. Here's part 2 to Miriam's dilemma. Now, here's some more clues that my point that this is a garden issue, a false self issue, a restoring of Miriam issue. Here's another clue. It said when the cloud removed from over the tent, so God walked and moved, he moved on this issue. And when the cloud removed over the tent, when he was done this conversation, behold, Miriam was leprous like snow. And Aaron, okay, that's big. She's leprous. Remember, she was the one that found the leprous Pharaoh's daughter. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. Okay, another thing where the Bible goes out of its way to say something that seems a little bit unusual. Like, why is it saying he turned to her? Because obviously, if someone's leprous in your presence, they're not going to be like, and then Robin turned her head and looked and saw a stop sign. It's like, no, it'd be like, everybody saw that there's a stop sign. But it says, Aaron turned toward Miriam. I think that's interesting too, because to me that speaks of Aaron. He was not the focus of this shunning at all. And let's look at why, but he turns toward her. He turns toward his sister, right? That's a language of intimacy to my ears. Her brother turns toward her, faces her, and sees leprosy. This is interesting. So let's connect some dots here. Pharaoh's daughter shows up at the Nile, leprous, touches Moshe, and is cured. Now, that same word's used when Moshe is in front of Pharaoh. The father's going to manifest his power through Moshe. So Moshe puts his hand out and it's leprous. He puts it back in his cloak and takes it out and it's not. So the father isn't showing his power by afflicting Moshe, but by demonstrating to Pharaoh that no matter what, he's going to heal Moshe, right? Moshe is this vessel of healing and deliverance, and the father is using him directly. Okay, let's keep going. This is getting very interesting. I love this story. All right, let's get to the next one. And Aaron said to Moshe, okay, so here's where we can see why this was an issue with the father and Miriam and not so much Aaron. Now, he did bring Aaron to the tent of meeting, right? Clearly, we see this. But Miriam's going to take the brunt of this intervention. But Moshe speaks up and Aaron speaks up. And this is what he says to Moshe. He says, oh, my Lord, do not punish her because we have done foolishly and have sinned. So Aaron isn't hiding like Adam and saying, we're just hiding. He was doing the opposite. He was pleading for mercy and help. He was confronting what he had done. He was owning it. He wasn't trying to cover anything up in himself or anything. All he was doing was pleading for his sister, whom he had faced and turned and saw her affliction. To me, that's like Aaron saw what was happening too. He saw that there was something that here was important, Miriam, right? So let's keep going. Apologize about my allergies. Okay. So, and Moshe cries to the Lord. Oh, no, let's get more. It says, don't punish us because we have done foolishly and sinned. Let her not be as one dead whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb. Oh my goodness. That's interesting language. We're going to look at that. And Moshe cries to the Lord, oh God, please heal her. Please. And then there's a word but there, which is not there. But it looks like, but the Lord said to Moshe, if her father had, this is the translation that you are commonly reading. This is not proper translation. Okay, it's common, but not proper. Okay. But the Lord said to Moshe, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days. After that, she may be brought in again. So Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. Oh my goodness. So this is where I talk about our big butts. Okay, so this word but, where Moshe cries to the Lord, oh God, please heal her, please. The word, and it says, but the Lord said to Moses, there's no but there. That makes all the difference in how we read that. He's begging for healing, but the father says, this looks like, but the father, it looks like I'm going to be acting in an alternative way. You're requesting healing. No, that is not at all. There's no but there. There's also no but where it says if her father had but spit in her face, would she not be shamed 7 days? That's not even how that's read at all. That's not how that is worded. And it changes the meaning completely. When we add these words, if you add the word but something, it completely changes what, if I say, I was looking for a new house and I found one that was not quite that new and I liked it. Imagine if I said, I was looking for a new house, but I found one that was not quite as new. Then I liked it. And is I migrated in a good, in like a, I don't really need a new house. The other one is, but I didn't get what I want, but I settled. Okay, do you see that changes the meaning? And that might not be the best example because that's such a minor example, but I was trying to find something that would just kind of be like in your usual, the way you usually talk. But when people say but, they're telling you some news and you're waiting for, they're like, I got a letter from Aunt Thelma. They were in a car crash, but they're fine. Like you're waiting for that but because it's going to tell you there's a U-turn here, but there's no U-turn here. Okay, let's keep going. Now here where it talks about if her father had but spit in her face, she would not be shamed 7 days. Okay, so this is how it actually reads. And I'm going to share a screen here because I want you to actually, hold on here. Let me share a screen because I want you to see what I'm talking about. Okay, you see this? You see this here? Let's compare these two translations. This is the improper one. But the Lord said to Moshe, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Question mark. Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again. But let's look here. Look at this one. The Lord said to Moshe, as a response to his request for her healing, if her father had spit in her face, she would not be shamed 7 days. Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days this time, and after that she may be brought in again. Now, that's a completely different thing. Let me show you. I want to show you this thing. She be shamed would not. Would not be shamed. That's the word there that we need to look at. Okay, let's stop screen here. Do you see what I'm saying there? Do you get me? Let me go here. So this is important that we understand this. If the word but is added by the translators, then you're seeing this U-turn, but it's not. This and then here, if her father had done this, but her father didn't. Now you need to know what the sages teach about Miriam and her father to understand what's happening here. She did not dishonor her father when she told and admonished him to remarry his wife to make a moshi. She was operating in her gifts then, but she was not operating in her gifts now. She was going by her own abacus of what she should be doing, when she should be intervening, and not by the calling of God. She was on her own, being her own God, right? Being her own director. But her father did not spit in her face. Her father did not. And if he had, since she was operating in her gifts, it wouldn't have shamed her anyway, because her shame, there was no shame for her operating in her gifts, but her father didn't do that. And there's no question mark in the text. That was added by the translators who think they're going to help you out, but it doesn't help you out. Do you understand that? It says, if her father had spit in her face, she would not be shamed 7 days, but she had not done anything dishonorable to generate and to warrant that. So let's keep going in order here with what we're talking about here. Let's get here. Get back here. Okay. I'm not going to get into that. Let's get into more clues. Okay. Now, here's something to know. Okay, so we're clear on the fact that this was not about this is not about shaming, right? This is about correction. There's an intervention that Miriam needs. Now, Aaron doesn't need it. He's already pleading for mercy. He's already gone to the court of mercy, and said, listen, we've done foolishly, but heal her. Like, she needs healing. And Miriam was precious to the Father, and he is in the business of healing us, not in telling us why he won't heal us. Now, healing doesn't always look like we think it will look. And in fact, most of the time it probably doesn't. I think sometimes the Father heals us through sickness of other things, deeper and more important, and our needs get met in different ways. He has his ways, right? His ways are higher than our ways. And that's a good thing. That's not him playing chess with your life. That's because you can't be like God, because you are not as smart as God. But luckily, thankfully, you are loved by God and parented by him. Now, skin diseases are a big deal. In Leviticus 13:46, it says, as long as the afflicted has the affection, he remains unclean, and he has to live alone in a place outside the camp. Again, in Leviticus 14:8, they're revisiting this. The one being cleansed must wash their clothes, shave off their hair, bathe with water, and then he'll be clean. And afterwards, they can go back to the tent, but not until they've been outside for 7 days. So there's a cleaning, cleansing time for this leprous infectious skin disease. So if I'm going to paraphrase, we're going to put this together, because leprosy was a real thing, right? It was infectious and infected people. You have to wash your garments. And remember that. But my paraphrase here to sum up what we just talked about is, if her father had spit in her face, which he did not, even then she wouldn't be ashamed or treated like a leper and sent out as unclean for 7 days, as her gift of prophecy was functioning in a way I intended it to at that time. But this time she's going to need correction for healing. She's manifesting as needing healing and as being infectious. And so she'll be separated from the camp so she may be restored. Okay, so that's what's really, I believe, going on. All right, so the question is, what is the healing intervention? It's to let her be shut out of the camp for 7 days. And after that, she can be brought back in again. So she's shut outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not set out march until she was brought back again. Okay, It goes out of its way to tell you they waited for her. Because when we need healing, our village needs to wait until the Father's done what he's done. If you have friends that need healing and the Father's healing them, wait. Don't move on without them. Let the Father accomplish his will in that person's life and let them experience it. And then let them come and share the testimony and celebrate this victory with the people in your life. But the false self is an infection, just like leprosy, right? So leprous is a manifestation on the skin. And there's even some tricky words associated with leprosy, which I think tell me even more about this idea of being infectious and being afflicted with something that you can see. When we are in our false selves, do you ever notice when you're with people that you have to perform for, or people who are in their false selves, you're more likely to be in yours? Do you ever notice that? I mean, I admit I'm like that, because it's very difficult to be vulnerable and transparent with people who aren't vulnerable and transparent with you. And you know, right? We know how this universe works in that way. When we're around people, you just get this vibe, this feeling that you can't be yourself around this person, and they can't be themselves around themselves or around you, right? They're a big cover up. So you're weighing this out in the back of your mind. Well, if they're a cover up, I think I need to be a cover up, because if they can't even accept themselves, imagine they're not going to accept me. Do you ever notice that? That's just a part of relationships, where you're going to have your people that you can be friends with, that you just feel like, I can just be myself with that person. I don't have to entertain them. If I need space, they give it. They don't even need to give me an interrogation about it. They know things that hurt me. They know what's going to help me. They know to give me space. They know to, like, gently and without shaming, call me out on something and say, wait, why are you deflecting the humor or whatever? All of these things are about the camp, the village, whatever you want to call it, your group, waiting for you, honoring this intervention, being a part of people who are brave enough to set apart and let the Father heal them. These are brave people, the people who are able to talk this way. These are impressive people. They are not gathering fig leaves to cover themselves obsessively all the time with all the things in creation that they're going to use to cover their brokenness. They're just not. They're like, I'm broken and I'm loved by God, and I'm going to emerge out of this hidden shell of a person, this image I've created myself, and I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to walk in healing. And when you walk in healing, you walk in that victory, and that is what he wants. So the intervention is that he's going to separate her and set her apart. Okay. Now, here's what's interesting. Timeout, right? You've heard this as a parenting technique that people have used in the last 20 years, where, you're in, I don't know if you've ever, I have 2 children and they're adults now, but when they were children, little kids, and, they were in the group, they were at the birthday party, or they were with all the cousins or whatever, and they were not handling the group well. They were showing off or being bullied or acting in a way that it just wasn't their best selves, right? It just wasn't good. There are times I had to take them and say, we need to get away from the group right now. You're not being appropriate. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. And I, as your parent, need to recognize that what the situation I placed you in is exceeding your resources. So we're going to take a time out. We're going to go rest and get some perspective. We're going to get away. We're going to get some air. You can't handle this right now. I'm mom. I know more than you, 2-year-old, and we're going to step out. Okay. That is not mean. That is recognizing that circumstances have exceeded the abilities of this person. And this is where mercy comes in. A timeout. I want to be put in timeout now. Do you understand? When I can't handle something, I would love somebody to say, Robin, you need a timeout. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go lay on my bed and read gentle books until I can come back to my senses. Wouldn't you want that? Well, that's what Miriam's getting. Okay. So, but here's what's really cool. We have a big, huge clue here. The word that is added, shut out, they're translating this word as shut out to give this context. That is not in the other passages of leprosy. They were to live alone for 7 days or to remain outside, but the word wasn't shut out. But they're using here the word shut out, which kind of like changes the context, like she's being shunned. But then that's not used with leprosy in the other, in Leviticus, right? So the word shut out, let me share a screen. I want you to see this. I think this is really, really interesting, and I want you to see this. Okay. Shut out. There's that word. Do you see that word? Is that big enough? I don't really know how to make that bigger. Yeah, I don't really know how to make that bigger, but there's the word right here. This is the word right here. Let's go and look at this word. Ready? These are the times that you first see this word. Back to Genesis. Again, my friends, we're hearkening back to the garden in that. Look what happened. It's when he closed the flesh in Adam, right? He closed the flesh where he had taken out Hava and healed it, sealed it, put him back together, put Adam back together. Here is when the ark was finished and it was raining, and right before the rain, the Father closed the door to seal them in protectively. And here is where the vandals were chasing, and they ran in and shut the door. It wasn't to shut out, to shun Miriam. It was to seal and protect Miriam, to seal and protect her. There's that word, is they were being shut in, not shut out, protected in time out. So here's another way to look at it. Let her be sealed outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought again. So actually, if you really want to know my opinion, this is more of the vision and the view I think Miriam had. She was set apart, not in this dirty, yucky room with rusty pipes while she got yelled at, but more like, let's get out and see something bigger than you can imagine. Let me stop my screen here and get back here. Okay. So let her be put outside the camp. Okay. Now, being put outside the camp. That camp, let's try to picture that camp. These people had been through a lot. I think there was a lot of chaos, because if you don't want the chaos, you don't want the people. Because when you have people, you have chaos. You have people with a lot of ideas, and you had this monumental event that was happening. They're being uprooted. Big miracles were happening. All of this was happening. Miriam had always been very instrumental in Moshe's life. Moshe was born because of Miriam. Moshe survived because of Miriam. And here's Miriam like, don't I even have a role? Aren't I important anymore? Aren't I important too? Don't I have a special role? Well, yes, you do have a special role, Miriam. But the Father's like, but you're special just to be with me. So he takes her out. Now, later on, this event with Miriam is referred to. And here's another clue, which I think really proves my point. And I'm going to share a screen because I want you to see this. You ready? Okay. In Deuteronomy 24:8-9, it says, in cases of infectious skin diseases, be careful to diligently follow everything the Levitical priest instructs you. Be careful to do as I have commanded them. And then it says, remember what the Lord your God, and then it says the word did to, which I challenge, but remember what the Lord your God made Miriam, how he made her, which makes me think back that flesh being sewn up, put back together on the journey after you came out of Egypt. So listen carefully with the way you deal with these infectious things, these things that need healing, infectious skin diseases, right? That can be the way that the Father was manifesting, you need healing, you need to be separated. Have you ever had that? You get a headache and you have to go and be quiet. That's probably a good thing sometimes. But the paraphrase is with remember this word. This word, if you look at this word, the word remember here means to act on. It says God remembered Noah. He didn't forget about Noah and then all of a sudden notice a boat and go, wait, Noah. Oh my goodness, Noah. He didn't do that. He acted on his promise. So when you go and you see here in Deuteronomy where they reflect back and they say, when it comes to these skin diseases that I think pop up as an act of mercy when people need to be separated and learn you're sick, you need healing, act on what the Lord God, how the Lord God bade Miriam on this journey. Act on it. Act on it. Right? So take care of your members, your people. Take care of them. And let's just make sure, and I wish we had time to actually see there's the word make, right? It's not just what he did to Miriam. Not that that would be bad because he did do that to Miriam, but it just has that inflammatory tone. Remember what God did to Miriam. I mean, if you can hear that through the lens of a good father who loves his daughter, sure. But the word is when he made the firmament, a yielding, a bearing of fruit. This is a positive word. And that's just something important to remember. These are just other examples of that same word. Now, if we get into the word here for infectious skin disease, to kind of prove my point a little more, that this is something that we need to take note of, that somebody needs healing and separation, it's a swelling, a rash, or a bright spot. So it wasn't just like one type of leprosy or one type of skin disease. Leprosy could refer to these things. It talks about burning up stuff where it's if it's spreading, right? But these words that are found here, when we look these words up, one of the words swelling can also be exaltation. When we're exalting ourselves, that's a false self. I need to exalt myself. No, the Father already made you very good. You don't exalt yourself. The Father already made you good. And this word is used here about with Cain, let not your, will your countenance be lifted? Dignity, right? These words that are using to describe these skin disease, to me, are clues that it's bigger than that. That there's a purpose for this infectious disease that's in our good. Because I think what's going on here is this. This is what I believe that Miriam was seeing, and what Miriam was acting on, and what Miriam had done. She had eaten off that tree. She wanted to be like God. She wanted to be the one that said all the cool things. She wanted to be the leader of the group. She wanted to have a loud voice at that moment. But she had fulfilled her duty already, and Moshe was there doing his. And the lesson is to learn that you are good enough, that you are loved, that you don't have to put anything on. You don't have to do that. In fact, don't, because the Father has made you the way he wants you to be. He's given you the cognitive functions that you have, and he's made you special. He's made you unique. He's made your constellation of the way that you think and process and talk and the things that you think are funny. He's put that all together. It's complicated, and he did it, and he's proud of himself. And why wouldn't he be? Because he's made people. He's made people with all different constellation of the way that they function and the way that they, process. That's exciting. And we can't add to that. We just have to learn who he made us to be, and learn about who he made other people to be, and not judge that, and just accept it. Because the Father is doing his job at delivering us, at sifting through to find who his bride is. It doesn't mean he doesn't have friends and guests at the wedding. But there is a sifting about who the bride is. And not everybody wants to be the bride. And that's a fact. And you see that. But you have Miriam, and she was this prophetess. She was the wise one. She was the rescuer, the watchman, the informant. This was her. This was Miriam, right? This was who Miriam was and will always be. But her legacy isn't because she did cool stuff. It's because she was made by a living God. And so in closing, as we put this together here, this part 2, and we'll have a part 3 eventually, Miriam's final mile, what was her final gift to us? Because is her life ending on this note? Well, we'll talk about her, where she's buried and everything, but what's her final gift to us in that she was taken outside the camp for 7 days and everybody waited for her? Well, what was the capstone of her legacy? It was just as big as how it started. She finished as well as she started by demonstrating being separated, waited for, intervened, afflicted, restored, but self-afflicted and restored anyway, right? Because he invests in his daughters, his beloved daughter. He invests in you and he invests in me. He puts himself out there to correct what we're breaking in ourselves. He's made you whole. You are found. But we break stuff. And I'm not condemning you. I do it. You do it. We all do it. We break stuff. And he fixes stuff, right? He's your parent. He knows you're a toddler a lot of the times. And he's got to keep you away from, you've got a fork and there's an outlet. And he's got to say, no, we're going to come out of this room that's all full of outlets for you right now with a fork. Because you've got to learn how to use the fork, but you also have to learn how to use outlets, but you don't use them together. But right now, Miriam, you're using a fork and an outlet together, and I need to take you out where there's no electricity, and we're going to talk about it. Maybe we'll touch something that might shock you a tiny little bit so you'll see, oh, yeah, okay, because that would be worse. So it all depends on the lens through which you see the father. Is he a good parent, loving his daughter and taking care of her? Or is he a mean, wrath-driven, shame-petty figure who's just out to assert his power for the sake of it? I would challenge the latter version of God, that is absolutely not true at all. And I think he demonstrates this with Miriam if we would read it properly, if we would go in and find the words and read these words. This is an important thing, because let's look at who Miriam really was. Like, who was she really? And let me share a screen here for you, because I want you to see the way I see Miriam. This is what I see. There's Miriam, a woman of God, created by God, in the image of God, loved, and just there, I picture her kind of like that as she's separated, as she's reflective and listening to him, and he's teaching her all the truths that she needs to know. Because you are loved beyond measure, fearfully and wonderfully made. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted over all the earth. Not you, him. And you are enough. You are enough, my friends. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Song of Solomon. Let me stop the screen here. So the story of Miriam is a beautiful story of restoration and intervention, and a brother turning toward his sibling and saying, she's walking through humanity and it hurts. Father, have mercy and help her. And the father's like, okay, I was going to do it anyway, but how nice when you see your children taking up for each other, right? How nice, because we're to love God and to love others. And that's so exciting. So there's part 2 for Miriam. There we go. I think that if we can understand that story as it's written, a lot less people are turned off. Gender politics are not going to come in here and distort a beautiful story of restoration. And I think it's important that we know that. So let's go into the chat for a minute and see who's here. And if you're done with the series for part 2, and you don't want to get involved in the chat, you can just hang up now this teaching here, and we'll get to part 3 as soon as we can. I'm not sure when exactly that'll be, but let's see who we have. We have Bob, and he says shalom from Babylon. And Ellen, hi Ellen. Hi Bob. And they know each other. Shalom Bob. And then we have Lena, and we have, oh my goodness, I love having a new person, Lena. And here's Lena. Abba was correcting his daughter, and she accepted it. That's right. I think that's a very positive story. Now, not all of our stories are like to be viewed as fairy tales because they're real stories, but I believe every story in the Bible is positive in the terms of, yes, sometimes when I had to correct my children, it didn't feel all that positive to them, but it was positive because everything I did was for their good. Everything I did was for their good. And to understand this teaching, you really do have to go into the first teaching, because we go into the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and what that really means and represents. And of course, that's really important. Thank you, Bob. I'm so glad that you enjoyed this teaching, and I hope it did help you, and I hope it helps like people that are holding the Bible against you as this weapon. Like, this is a mean book. This is a mean God. What a horrible story. He hates women, right? And that isn't at all what's going on. And it wasn't about her gender. It was about her process. It was about her brokenness. And it was about her attempt to earn what was already given to her. Humanity was how we were made. Humanism is when we try to decide our value rather than saying that God can decide it. There's a difference between humanity and humanism. We don't do humanism on this channel, but we do embrace our humanity, because when we reject the limits he gave us as humans, we reject our humanity and we try to compete with him. And you know what? We are in danger of death when we think we can take on his responsibilities in our life, because that is a gerbil on a wheel, my friend. You will never get there. You weren't supposed to get there. You were supposed to just be on the path he gives you while he binds up the boo-boos, while he restores you, while he reminds you you are made very good. Don't add to it. And it is not accessible for you to even touch. And people who get that are the people who can love on their neighbor, even when their neighbor's being really not very like lovable acting. And I'm not saying I'm a saint in that I'm always like, oh, I just love, but generally, if there's a person I come across that I really dislike, I'm thinking, I don't think I have enough information. There's a lot that the Father knows we don't know. And there's Bob talking to Lena. It's so fun. I love when the people talk to each other, that like we're a family here. But when we think that we can know the difference between good and evil, we are just so above our pay grade. Our rank does not dictate we know that. Our rank isn't there. We weren't there during everybody else's life. So when I was teaching at a conference, and I was just looking at one of the precious women there, this woman, Tracy, and just looking at her eyes and just thinking about her, just trying to, that's what I do when I teach, is I like focus on a person for a second. And I'm thinking about all of the things that God knew about her that I didn't. And only God knows what's good and what's evil, because even something that's right doesn't mean that you're doing right, doesn't mean it's good. And even something that you're doing that is wrong doesn't mean it's evil. Look, the midwives lied. That was technically wrong because they were breaking a commandment about lying, but there was nothing evil about it. It was good because they were preserving life. But when I'm looking at this beautiful woman, Tracy, and I'm thinking about her, it's like looking at her and thinking how the Father heard it. He heard her when she was 3 years old and someone hurt her feelings and she never really knew what to make of it. And then when she was 32, something like it happened and it triggered something in her. And then it caused this. And then she said that. Now, maybe it was whatever. We don't know. We can't look at her and say, that was an evil thing to say. And I'm not trying to be a relativist. I'm not trying to disqualify obedience or kindness or whatever. But what I'm saying is the Father was there for everything in her life, every second, every minute. He knows everything. So he can judge every action she does through his merciful parental lens where he corrects and shepherds and hugs and loves on her. And so we have to understand that. We don't know good from evil. We will never know it. In the world to come, whatever he shares with us, we are going to be surprised at what was good and evil, I think. I personally think that. But I know the Father knows us, and he knows you better than you think. He knows everything. He knows things about you you don't know. He knows what happened to you when you were 9 months old. He knows that bad babysitter. He knows that took care of you and what happened that day. He knows when you were, when you broke your leg and how you felt left out. And that might not even be something that you're thinking about, but that comes out in you. Because when the word universe even, right, is one verse where it's spoken. Well, the Father, the creator of the universe, this might not be a popular idea in the secular world here, but the Father spoke this universe into being. And he spoke the Torah, which connects the universe together. The Torah holds the universe together because it's truth, and truth holds everything together. And when we go against him, we go against the entire universe. It's so important that we understand how important it is that we trust and follow our Father. So when he's telling his children, I am speaking directly to Moses to get you out of bondage. You know what? Trust me. I have found my servant who will listen, and I'm filling him with all the truth, and he's getting you out. So he wasn't punishing her for being divisive. He was healing her, because divisiveness was a tool for her to feel valuable. Because what was the lie she was probably believing about herself was that if I'm not doing amazing things, then what good am I? Kind of like child stars, right? They're young and they're cute and they're in the credits and they're at the premieres and they're all this, and then they grow up and they're not cute anymore. And you have a lot of problems because they have formed their identity around what they did when they were younger. Well, God didn't want that for Miriam. He wanted Miriam in the moment, who she was and who she had grown into being. Because Miriam's a beautiful daughter of God. So we have to get into these characters, not think about what would we do. What did Miriam do? And how did God love Miriam? And we can know that he loves us just like that. So are you in a timeout right now in your life? Are you separated? Are you in a rut? Are you whatever you are? You know what? Let's just pray that we can recognize the fingerprints of the Father all over our lives and how he's the potter and we're the clay. And we can trust that. And we're going to talk about what to do when we get in ruts. Because this whole situation in our world right now has really affected a lot of people. And people need to be encouraged. And we need to encourage each other, okay? The village has to wait. The camp, the entire camp needs to wait while we get restored. And then we'll all march on together. And then I'm going to stop and wait for you while you're getting restored. Because we are together. We're safe when we're together. So there we go. I think we went a little over today. Yes, we did. We're always a little bit 8 minutes out. And then here, oh, Lena, you're talking. I've always wondered, why didn't the Father treat this situation equally with Miriam's brother Aaron? Exactly. Thank you, Lena. See, people wonder that. You're just wonderful to mention that. As with the woman brought to Yeshua caught in adultery, instead of condemning her, he said, go and sin no more. Right. Because if you have to have the man and the woman that were committing adultery, and they're both stoned, but they were caught in the act. They would have to kill the man, and they didn't want to kill the man because he was probably one of them. So the Father is fair and just, right? And if there's any takeaway that you ever get, is to remember that obedience is trust. And that is, we are always to be obedient, but we are never to think that we can be like God. The role he plays in our life as our Father, right? He is our Father. He is sovereign. You know what that means? It means he takes care of you. He takes responsibility for this whole situation. That's what happens, because he puts his money where his mouth is, because at the foundation of the world, he gave us the answer. He gave us Yeshua. So before you were sick, the medicine was in veins that weren't even made yet. You were all set because he has taken care of you. But we do walk this out, and it's really hard. And we can do it because he has equipped us with the ability to lean on him. He has equipped us with his Torah. He's equipped us with friends, with love. And he can work this whole thing out. Life is hard, right? It's very, very hard, and we're together. So having this time together, and go and sin no more, Lena. That's exactly what he said. Don't do that anymore. But the Torah only advocated for the punishment of both. That's how we can stop. That's how fairness was established for the woman. Very important. Yes. So patriarchy does not get any points on that, does it? So I really enjoyed being able to talk about Miriam today. I'm excited that you sat through the whole thing. I hope you go back to part 1 and can listen to it, because to be honest, without part 1, and obedience is trust. Yes, Ellen, thank you. I'm glad that you see that, because, I don't want anyone to think that I'm talking relativism. And if you're not obedient, God, it's okay. I don't think it's ever okay to be disobedient. There will always be consequences, because the plate is spun, truth stands. And when we walk against truth, we walk against everything, and we bring discordance into our life. It's very important. And we have to know that. We have to trust and follow our Father in heaven. We have to obey. We must. And when we don't, yes, will he pull us out of the pit? Absolutely. But will we come out with some chiggers and some scars? Yes, we will. But the Father is there to restore you. And so we're not going to go looking for ways to disobey, but when we fall into pits, he pulls us out. And sometimes we do come out with a broken leg. And that's because we are told not to walk around pits, and we have to listen to him. He keeps us safe. He loves us. So whatever it is where you might have felt condemned or shunned or hurt, let me tell you something. You've been restored. You've been corrected. That rod of mercy is just poking you into the pasture, because that's the safe place to be. And that's what the Father wants, is he just wants to love you, and he does love you, and he wants you to know he loves you. And he wants you to know to let go of the throne, let go of the scepter. He's got it covered. He's got this whole thing covered. So no matter where you've been, what you've done, I want today to be an encouragement to you. He's after you too, just like he was after Miriam, listening, triggered by her pain and her loss and her brokenness, and acting on it and taking the time to invest in her. He's investing in you. So wherever you've been, remember that the future begins now. Bye-bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.